Hello everybody. Has it ever happened to you that during examination hall or during giving some kind of an interview, you might feel very much nervous, right? It might also happen to you that during examination hall, despite knowing the solution to every kind of question, there might be a feeling of nervousness like how to do this type of question despite knowing all the answer to that question. It might also happen to you that during interview, when the interviewer asks you one simple questions, you might get numb, you might get flattened at that point, and you didn't know what to answer and how to answer. If that happened to you, then you are not alone, because this is the problem for most of the young generations. In this video, I'm going to tell you some basic simple trick and one simple technique through which you can trick your brain and you can able to overcome and cope up with nervousness, your anxiety, your stress, and your fear and your threatness, right? With this technique and following the step-by-step solutions to this technique, you can never be feeling nervous again, and you will be always confident, and you can cope up with all the difficult and extreme situations of your life. So without any further ado, let's get started with the video. Ladies and gentlemen, before going on to know about what is the basic step and what is the basic technique to overcome nervousness, let us talk about what is the basic reason and why we feel nervous in our life. The answer to this, ladies and gentlemen, lie in the evolution of our mankind. See what happened when we get evolved from caveman era, that is from apes, to the massive rulers of this world, or I can say the Homo sapiens, or the humans, simple human beings. What has happened that in our brain there was a simple transition, there was a massive transition in our brain as well, due to which, as in the present situation, we have two types of brain. Number one brain is known as the monkey brain, and the second is known as the scientist part of the brain. Let me go through this. During caveman era, what happens that our brain was only meant for survival, right? When we were apes and when we were cavemen, what we do is that we just had the habit of running from extreme situations, from extreme disastrous things, right? Like for example, we run from extreme weather, we run from animals, we run from predators, we look for shelters, and we look for running from every kind of extreme and difficult challenges in our life. That's why that caveman type of brain is still there in our mind. And since the evolution has taken place such a vast extent, that part of the brain is still there in our mind, and therefore we are always behaving like a monkey, or I can say behaving like a caveman era, or behaving like an ape. That is why whenever we see very difficult situations, or whenever we feel nervous, or whenever there is a stress kind of situation, we always try to run away from that situation, right? We always try to go away from the situation. We always try to procrastinate that kind of situations, because we just don't want to fight that situation, because our brain is also like a caveman era. That means the monkey type of brain, or the brain that we have evolved from the caveman era, has no logical reasoning, no logic, cannot understand even simple complex languages. That is, it is completely numb, and that is the reason why you feel completely numb and some kind of extreme and difficult situations. Now, the second part of the brain is known as the NeoCortex. This is basically a part of the brain which is responsible for a logical reasoning. This part of the brain is known as scientist part of the brain. This is the only part of the brain through which we can think critically, through which we can think logically. We can understand difficult and complex problems in our life. We can understand different arithmetic and mathematical problems in our life. That is the reason why we think logically. That is the reason why we cope up with difficult and extreme situations in our life. This is known as the scientific part of the brain. Now, as for now, since the evolution, we have two types of brain. One is the monkey type of brain that is only meant for survival and for running from extreme situations, and the second part is known as the neocortex part of the brain, which is also known as the scientist part of the brain, and that is responsible for logical reasoning and to coping from difficult and extreme situations of life, right? But the interesting part is that in one situation, depending on situations, your brain can only operate either as a monkey brain or either as a scientist brain. Now, the basic question is, which is the deciding factor? Which part of the brain decides, and which factor decides that on which part of the brain to operate, right? Either to be act as a monkey, or either to act as a scientist, either to run from situations, or either to face the difficult situations. Ladies and gentlemen, the answer lies in stress. Yes, when you are feeling stressed, your brain decides to run away from the situations, and that's why your brain acts like a monkey. Whenever you are feeling stressed, and whenever the stress pops out in the brain, your brain tells you to run away from the situation, because your brain suddenly switches to the monkey type of brain, and therefore that monkey cannot able to cope up with difficult and extreme situations of your life, and therefore your brain says to run away from the situation. The moment when stress pops out, you always act like a monkey, you always run from the situation. But when there is no stress, but when there is no anxiety, but when there is no fear, you always act like a scientist, you always think logically, right? That is the reason why you think logically. Now, how to manage these types of nervousness, how to manage these types of difficult and extreme situations of your life? The answer to this, ladies and gentlemen, lie in one simple technique, and that technique is known as firefighter technique. Guys, you know that whenever the firefighters gets appointed to, just distinguish some kind of fire in a particular building or apartment, that firefighter, if that is the new firefighter, that is, if it's for the experience is for the first time, the firefighters also get scared from the extreme fire, right? Because since the firefighter is doing that sin for the first time, firefighter is ought to be very much threatened, is ought to be very much scared of from the fire, right? But as soon as slowly and steadily when it goes for the second time, it is the firefighter becomes less scared of the fire, and similarly when it goes for the third time, the firefighter becomes more or less scared from the fire, and similarly goes on and on. And when the firefighters go on to distinguish the fire for the sixth time, he becomes extremely bulletproof from the scaration of fire, from the fear of fire, from the anxiety, from the nervousness, because he has been able to cope up with this kind of emergency situation, right? He has the habit of this kind of emergency situation. Whenever you see the experienced firefighter or whenever you see the experienced army officer, you say that in their face there is no fear, in their face there is no nervousness. Why? Because they have the habit of coping up with these kinds of emergency situations, right? They have the habit of coping up and facing these kind of difficult and extreme situations in their life, right? Similarly, this is the only technique that you have to follow in your life as well. Like for example, whenever you have the fear of examination hall, I would suggest you to, wherever you study and your study desk, just make the environment of your examination hall, right? Because your brain, when your brain gets the habit of the examination hall, when your brain gets the habit of sitting in the examination hall, sitting in the environment like of examination hall, then your brain will never get nervous during the right examination hall. If you have the nervousness of giving interviews, I would suggest you to keep on practicing giving interviews in front of a mirror, right? Just give interviews to yourself, ask question to yourself and give interviews to yourself. In that way, your brain will get in the habit of asking and answering the questions very much directly and very much confidently, and therefore you never feel nervous again. Second example would be that if you have the fear of time consciousness, right? For example, in the examination hall, there is a particular limited time, right? You have to complete the paper in within 2 hours or within 3 hours, right? Like let's say you have the fear and anxiety that whenever the time passes, like let's say the time gets close to 3 hours, you have to complete the paper, you have this stress, right? So what I would suggest you that just buy an alarm clock or buy a timer, stopwatch timer, just set the timer and practice daily for at least 30 days. Practice daily about time consciousness, right? About completing the paper within 3 hours. This will directly help you, and that will make your brain in the habit of just completing the paper before 3 hours or before 2 hours or before 2.5 hours. This will really help you. Or if I say, if you have a very difficult in answering questions during an interview or during examination hall, I would suggest you to make the environment of examination hall in your room. Or I can say just put a stopwatch or timer in front of your desk, so that you can know about the time consciousness, you can know about the experiences, you can know very much about the everything that is happening in the examination hall or during an interview. If you will keep on making this habit inside your brain will get used to these kind of situations. Your brain will get used to these kind of circumstances, and therefore whenever there will be extreme or difficult situation in your life, you will never feel nervous again, you will never feel anxious again, you will never threatened again, because whenever this small things happen in our life for the first time, we feel scared of, right? We just scared of from the troubles, we just scared of from the difficulties, and we just scared of from the extreme situations of our life, and that is the reason we get nervous, and that is the reason we get anxious in our life. And therefore, in order to cope up this nervousness and anxiousness, I'm repeating again, just make the habit of coping up with difficult and extreme situations in your life. Make this habit inside your brain. Make your brain prone to these kind of situations. You will never feel nervous again, I promise you. So that is it for today, guys. This was the effective technique that I have followed, and you can also follow in order to cope up with nervousness, in order to cope up with your fear or anxiety, in order to cope up with your fear or your anxiety. And I hope this video have given you some kind of value and given you some kind of extreme value addition in your life. If that is so, please hit the like button and share and subscribe to my channel. I will keep on bringing this kind of video in the future, and I will see you again next time. Bye. Take care.